Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for our weekly Q&A session with me, Andrew Musgrove, and our Newcastle United editor, Aaron Stokes. If you're listening on the podcast, please remember to like and follow and leave us a rating and review if you get the chance. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, where we're broadcasting live, thank you very much for doing so. Aaron, no new signs at Newcastle United thus far. Obviously, Matt Targett has already come in, rejoined after his loan spell. We know they're very much interested in Sven Botman and Hugo Ekitike. What is the latest of your understanding on both of those deals, and can we expect any movement over the next few days?
Yeah, I think this week's going to be a big week in terms of transfers. The club have made no secret that they want deals done quickly, and these two are definitely the closest deals to happening. Both players on the holidays, Botman especially wanted his future sort of wrapped up before he went on holiday after international duty. That hasn't been the case. There's talk that he's having another meeting with Lille this week that'll hopefully speed up the process, but there's still no news as to whether, Newcastle or Milan are going to win that battle for him. It does feel like he's sort of holding out for Milan. Just depends whether they can get their takeover issues sorted sooner rather than later. For Ekitike, we know that there's been a fee agreed with Rems and Newcastle. Personal terms between Ekitike and Newcastle are close to being agreed, but there's just a few sticking points to be ironed out. We did a piece Friday that essentially said it's close, but there's still agent fees and other sort of sticking points that haven't been finalised yet. So this week will be big. And I think, if we're looking at the second signing of the summer, then it's definitely going to be one of those two. And hopefully sooner rather than later.
Now, we know Sven Botman wants to play Champions League football. We've also seen it with the link with Diaby over in the German league, where he wants to also, with Bayer Leverkusen, play Champions League football. How much of a problem do you think the fact that Newcastle at this moment cannot offer European football is when it comes to going after not necessarily big names, but talented players?
Yeah, it's going to be a big problem, to be honest, because look, Newcastle are the richest club in the world. There's no secret of that. It's a great project. You look at what War Flags have done and turn it into a great advert for the city and the club. But the cold hard facts of it are, they're still a mid-table club as of this minute. Yes, the potential is there to go further and kick on maybe next season or the next 2 or 3 seasons, but AC Milan are offering Botman right now Champions League football. Moussa Diaby at Bayer Leverkusen has spoke about his dream of playing Champions League football. He can get that this summer if he stays there. So, look, Newcastle fans know this. I think the club know this, that they've got a great sales pitch in front of them, but without that sort of European football right now, we could be waiting 2 or 3 windows before they get proper serious talents through the door.
Is it difficult, do you think, with players like Sven Botman, who is held in such high regard? The move he makes now is likely to be probably his biggest of his career. You might argue. So in a way, do Newcastle have to maybe lower their aim for certain players, because with Botman he has those European aspirations? It's going to be 3-4 years before Newcastle can seriously offer that. So is it a case that maybe they lower their target and bring in players that can still do a job, but maybe it's not going to be as easy to sign someone like Botman, who is going into that stage of his career where he's going to be playing at the top of his game?
Yeah, I would say so. Look, I don't think it's about Newcastle need to, drop a level in terms of the sort of caliber of players they want to sign. They will still attract big names. You look at Kieran Trippier, had Champions League football. He was defending La Liga winner when he joined in January. But I think, certain players, Botman, for example, is 22, like you say, full career ahead of him. This is a sort of a career-defining move. Has he got in the back of his mind, look, if I join Newcastle and it doesn't all go how they say it's going to go, and, the club don't take that next step, am I going to be, in the lurch? Am I going to be out of the Netherlands setup? That's obviously going to play on people's minds. Not all players are in it for a payday, and especially with a World Cup later this year, a lot of players will be having one eye on, the best sort of move to get them into the frame for their respective countries. So I think it depends on the player, what they're after. We've seen the likes of Kieran Trippier and Bruno say that, they wanted to join the project. We aren't going to be Arsenal to every single deal. We did well to do it in January with Bruno, but, as Gudusi likes to say, patience needs to be required, and it's not going to happen overnight with players of that caliber who want to be playing Champions League football right now.
And we'll get on to what Mirdad Gudusi replied to a fan on Twitter. But I'm just wondering if you think Newcastle have kind of shown their hand already? Because they went after Ekitike in January, they went after Botman. Then Amanda Staveley came out and basically said, we're going to go back in the summer. So, the two selling clubs here know these are top of Newcastle's shopping list. So do you think that plays into the selling club's hands because they effectively can sit back and say, well, we know they really want them. So come on, show us how much money you've actually got.
Potentially, and look, that's the danger. We know already that Newcastle are going to have an extra tax added to their transfer dealings. Maybe this is going to, increase that price a little bit more if the selling clubs know that they're desperate to buy them. But I actually think it shows a positive side of this ownership. Ekitike turned them down in January, say he didn't believe in the project or whatever it was. Botman, could have joined in January, didn't. But the owners said, look, we're going to go get them in the summer. We want the best of the best. And these two players are, two of the most highly rated youngsters across Europe. So the way I see it is good on them for saying, let's not give up on them just because they've missed out the first time.
I guess it shows a calm hand. They've clearly planned this. They've scouted both of these chaps, to the high heavens. They like what they see. There's a reason they're going back in 6 months later. And it's not a scattergun approach, is it? And you also feel if Botman does join AC Milan, like in January when they didn't get him, they went after Dan Burn, there will be a backup plan of quality as well in case plan A doesn't come off.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've reported in the last week on the Chronicle how there isn't just one target in each position, and I think they've got their backup plan sorted. If Botman does decide he wants to go to Milan, then they move on to the next one. If Ekitike moves, then you've got the likes of Ismail Star and other wingers that they've looked at in the past. So I agree. I don't think it's a scattergun approach. I do think the owners will have probably learned something from one replacing Steve Bruce when they had that full Unai Emery saga. I think they'll probably learn that they probably need to keep a couple of things close at their chest in terms of their January dealings. And, it was very brave of Staveley to come out in February and say that, Botman wanted to join and all this because, fans lap that up and it gives fans, I'm not going to say false hope because he could still join, but, fans are expecting that now. And it's sort of it's the gamble you take when you come out and speak so openly in public about these things.
That leads us on to the next discussion point, and that is Mirdad Gudusi on Twitter. Now, in case you guys haven't seen it, there was a fan and he tweeted Mirdad on Twitter. We know Mirdad Gudusi and Jim Rubin very vocal on that social media platform. This fan tweeted basically saying, if you don't sign someone, I'm going to stick to the golf. He was voicing his displeasure and frustration, which some of you may also feel that Newcastle haven't added to the squad other than Matt Targett. And Mirdad, to his credit, some might say, tweeted back saying patience is a virtue. What did you read into the whole saga of that?
I feel a bit sorry for the owners because, look, it's great that they're on social media. It's great that they're being open with a club, but they must be getting bombarded with messages from, desperate fans seeking some transfer news, and, their notifications are probably going off. But I think what Mirdad says is right. We've got to remember we're only 10 days into this summer transfer window. They've got all the way till September to make the signings. Yes, we know that they want to do things early and not be sort of, still scrambling around for deals once the season started and deadline days approaching. But as we said, trust the process. These owners have got their plans in place. If Botman doesn't sign, it's not the end of the world. They will have another centre-back that they can go at. So I think I agree with Mirdad, and that would just be my message to fans is let's just be patient. We've got to remember, not even 12 months ago, we were trying to scrape around a loan fee on deadline day for Hamza Chowdhury, and now we're in this privileged position of being able to attract the likes of Botman and Ekitike. So I think, a bit of sort of
patience.
A bit of patience is just required,
What I'm going to say is, I'm quietly confident that Mirdad and Jim Rubin will definitely have their notifications switched off. I think that's a given, isn't it? But it is important to remember, as you mentioned there, Newcastle nearly every window recently before the takeover was linked to Hamza Chowdhury. No disrespect to the midfielder, decent midfielder, but it was always about getting him on loan. Newcastle wouldn't pay the fee. Then we had the Joe Willock saga, didn't we? When Newcastle came out and said, basically, we broke all the rules. We signed the player that the fans wanted, Steve Bruce wanted, but then there was no money left in the pot. We're not getting that anymore. Newcastle are seriously in the market for some good players. It's well thought out. There's money there. There's ambition there. It's just a totally different ball game. And I think it is maybe a case of let's just remember where Newcastle were, like you say, not even 12 months ago to where they are now.
Yeah, definitely. And look, this summer will be an important one, and it's no surprise that fans are so desperate for news. But I bet when we look back in September 1st and we look back at the 150 names linked with a club across a couple of months, how many of those deals won't be done. So, like I say, it's just about patience, and the right players will be brought in this summer. It might just take a bit more time.
I think the other important thing is if each player they're going after doesn't come in, it'll not be for the want to try. And it's really refreshing that Newcastle now under ownership that actually are actively trying to do things and not going out and spending players when the lack of adding to the squads hit them hard. They're going out, they're being proactive rather than reactive. And I think when Newcastle were under Mike Ashley, where it was the bare minimum in contrast to what these guys are trying to do, it is really refreshing. And it's just good to see them having a plan and just being active in the window.
Yeah, 100%. Under Mike Ashley, everything was reactive. It was, we've just been relegated. Let's go and spend 50 million because we have to, and we have to get back up, or we've just sold X or Y and we need to replace them. So let's get a cheaper alternative in. This window already, we've seen the owners on the front foot. They've wasted no time getting Matt Target in. They've wasted no time trying to revive those deals that they maybe missed out on in January. And Eddie Howe's made it clear in his last couple of press conferences before the season ended that he really wanted, the players to have a summer where it wasn't really disrupted. They want the players in early. They want everyone back for pre-season in a fit state so that they've got the best chance of hitting the ground running by the time the season starts. So I think we'll see, and we've said this on the podcast before, but I think the players that he wants to sign and the key signings that they make this summer will be done before that first game with Notts Forest.
We've got there Hassan Musa asking, do we think Newcastle are going to sign Lucas Paqueta, Botman, and Hugo Ekitike? So we've discussed their Botman and Hugo Ekitike. They are top of the list when it comes to Newcastle's shopping list. I do think Ekitike will come through the door. I think it is just a matter of time. Botman perhaps is a little more up in the air because it would appear his first choice is AC Milan, and all depends on how their takeover goes through. They can offer that Champions League football as discussed. With Paqueta, for me, I think it's a bit of a dream signing, one of those Hollywood signs. It would be great to see Bruno's mate come in and have three Brazilians in the midfield, Joelinton, Guimaraes, and Paqueta. But as we discussed last week, the midfield I don't think is a priority. And Newcastle, while they might be by name the richest club in the world, they will have a budget that they have to stick to, financial fair play. They're not just going out and going to go spend the riches. So I don't think the midfield is a priority. The asking price for Paqueta is rumored to be 60 odd million. Even if he does want to leave and match up with Guimaraes, there is other positions in this squad that need strengthening, and that kind of money can go a long way to doing that.
Yeah, and I think it wouldn't be a surprise if Paqueta came in this summer. Look, these owners have got grand plans to improve every area of the team, but I think they'll get the deals they need to do first. Leon, in the past have been, tough negotiators. Their president has made, no sort of secret of that over the years with Lacazette and Fekir and other players who have maybe departed. So I don't think that'll be an imminent deal, but like I say, I wouldn't be surprised whether they revisit it at the end of the month, or the end of the summer, depending on how other deals have gone.
We have Jonathan there asking about Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which is who's been linked, the Everton striker been linked over the past few days. It's another interesting one, isn't it? I think Everton and the fans and their owners and probably Frank Lampard will be looking at last season as a blip, and they'll be wanting to get back on a level footing with the teams like Newcastle, like Aston Villa, where I think Newcastle will be on par with, and they'll be looking, I think, in their mindset to break into that top 10, rid the nightmare of last year. So I would think it would take an astronomical bid for Everton to sell Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, look, the fee's already been talked about at 40, 50 million. It's, as we keep saying, it's a hefty chunk out of what probably isn't a budget that fans think it is this summer. I don't think that we're going to see anywhere near sort of 150 million as, some outlets have reported in recent months. So you've also got to factor in that the fact he's had a very, very difficult season last year of Calvert-Lewin. He's been in and out the team with injuries. When he's been back, he hasn't been in form. As you say, Lampard will want to keep him, Mashiri, the chairman of Everton, will want to keep him as well. So it's a tough deal to do. And, we've said previously on podcasts that there's going to be certain deals this summer that are really hard to get over the line. And I think Calvert-Lewin, especially being a Premier League rival as such, would go into that category as well.
In terms of the other positions, we've mentioned Botman, we've mentioned Ekitike. There's lots of links to a goalkeeper. Is that another one where you can see Newcastle strengthening if the right person came up and was available, but it's not necessarily a position that's at the front of the queue?
Look, I don't think any fans would be concerned if we went into the season with Dubravka still as number one and maybe Darlow as number two. I know, look, Darlow hasn't got a run in recently, but he did all right at the start of last season, and he sort of warmed the fans. So I don't think it's at the top of their list, but we've seen a lot of links: Nick Pope, Dean Henderson, which we know probably isn't going to happen. But if you can think of, a relegated team like that, getting Nick Pope in 10, 15 million, it makes sense, to be fair. And there'd be a debate as to whether he came in as a number one or whether he would battle Dubravka, but it does feel to me like we probably do need someone to push Dubravka a bit more. He's a younger player who could probably sort of step into that role when Dubravka eventually leaves. I feel like for all Darlow's been a good servant, I don't know whether he could battle Dubravka in a week-on-week level. So if they bring in another keeper this summer, I think fans would be happy. But like I say, I don't think it's a priority, to be fair.
I'm just looking at, obviously, Mane's move to Bayern Munich, and he was a great servant for Liverpool. I think they bought him for 35 million. They've sold him for something similar. And that's kind of Klopp and Liverpool being quite ruthless. He's still 31, still one of the best players in the Premier League, but they've said, fine, yeah, you want to go, you go, don't want to sign a new contract, right? We'll get rid of you. And I think we can apply that to what needs to happen at Newcastle. And there are plenty of players who've been good servants for this club, have been linked with exits. And I think what we'll see this summer, and it'll continue into January and the summers that come afterwards, is that there's no room for sentiments in this game. And, the players who maybe have been here 5-6 years, got new long contracts not that long ago, or even players who, are still young, got the best years ahead of them. Yes, they may have this potential, but Newcastle, their owners, Eddie Howe, Dan Ashworth, they're going to have to be ruthless in cutting players away for the good and progression of Newcastle United.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I don't mean to be disrespectful to Dwight Gale here, but Dwight Gale leaving this summer is probably not as tricky of a decision as Liverpool letting Mane go. But I do get your point. And, we've said it the last couple of months, this squad does need to be trimmed down. There's a lot of players who spent the last 6 months not even making the bench, and they do need to be moved on so that they can, revamp the squad. In a couple of years' time, we might be in that position of Liverpool where we're saying, right, we need to move, dare I say it, Bruno up, a player of that ilk on, because the likes of Bayern are coming calling. But this summer is important that they don't just bring in the right players, but they free up that room. A couple of months ago, we were talking about Will Longstaff leave. He hasn't done it, isn't. Only Hayden gone so far. They do need to probably speed up that process and get the likes of Clark and other players off the books that haven't really featured under Howe in recent months.
We're expecting the likes of Kieran Clark to go, Dwight Gale to go. Can you see any surprise exits if it does? Are you thinking of anyone that a team comes knocking in Newcastle that could be tempted if the bid's big enough?
We spoke about it briefly last week, didn't we? But if a bid came in for Shelvey, and I'm not saying that it will, but if a bid comes in for Shelvey, who's done fantastic under Eddie Howe, if a club offers him 15 million, would Howe be against selling him? I'm not so sure. There's been lots of talk about Maxi. It would probably take 40, 50 million. I can't see anybody really this summer coming in with a move of that size. Then elsewhere, you're really looking at the likes of Elliot Anderson, who you'd think will go out on loan rather than a permanent deal with bigger clubs. So I'm looking at that team. I don't think that there's many players really. It's fascinating. Even the likes of Callum Wilson, fantastic player. No one ever gets linked to him. So it does look like this summer it's going to be sort of players moved on to lower teams. And I don't think at the minute it looks like there's any first team players that are really catching the eye of our Premier League teams.
We've got a question just above there about how you, Aaron, think that the transfer window will go and whether Newcastle will do their business prior to the season kicking off. It's from Graham Townsley, and he says, how do we see the overall window? Do we think business will be done by the start of the season, or do you think we'll be busy right up until the end? And if so, do you think no European football will sort of, we've briefly discussed the no European football. But I mean, just on that last point, what is the sales pitch? Do you think they can't offer Champions League football? They can't offer Europa League football. Yes, they can offer bigger wages than most teams that finish mid-table. Yes, they can say, well, we're there. Look at all these videos of the stadium last season. Look at that Arsenal game. The atmosphere was buzzing, and it's easy for us to sit here as fans of the club and everyone watching and listening. We get wrapped up in that emotion, don't we? We get wrapped up in Bladen races. But to Sven Botman, he's probably got no idea what the Bladen races is, so it's not as easy a sell as that, is it? So, what is the sales pitch, do you think?
I think you've touched on a lot of those there. I think a big one is Premier League football. The likes of Botman and Ekitike, who have only sort of experienced abroad. Everybody wants to play in the Premier League. They know that if they're going to come to this team, they're going to walk into it because, there's no way we're going to see Botman, behind the likes of Lascelles in the pecking order. So I think that's one, and I think that's important, as we've touched on in a World Cup, playing regular football. As we've said, war flags in the atmosphere at St James's is a big pull. We've seen opposition players walking out at St James's and walking around and being quite astonished by what they've seen. The money, of course, is a big factor. We don't really touch on it as much, but Newcastle United can offer more than the likes of Everton and Villa. Maybe not the bigger teams, because they have to keep that wage structure, as similar to as it is now. So I don't think we'll be seeing any sort of £200,000 a week players coming in or anything of that ilk. But we've touched on it there. There's 4 or 5 things that, yes, Newcastle are only a mid-table club. Yes, 6 months ago they were battling relegation. The sales pitch, it does sell itself at times, and I think there's a lot of reasons that players would want to join this summer.
And in terms of the other bits of the question there, how do you see the window going? Do you think Newcastle will have the majority of their signings in before the season kicks off on August the 6th?
I think that's certainly the aim, but I think every club goes into every window saying that, they always want the deals done, and it doesn't always work like that. I mean, we've seen already this summer, even though the window's only been open 10 days, there's been links for months, really, and sometimes deals drag on, and it's going to be a busy summer. Chelsea are going to strengthen, Arsenal are going to strengthen, Villa are already making moves, Tottenham are signing a lot of players for Antonio Conte. So the aim is definitely to go into the season with a settled squad and the bulk of that team knowing that they're going to be in and around the first team on the first day. But as we've seen in previous windows, it can drag on. But look, I think Newcastle are in good hands. The ownership have set their plans out. Dan Ashworth coming in is a big help with the likes of transfer talks. So I wouldn't be concerned yet. And as we keep saying, I would urge fans just to be patient, and things won't happen overnight. But I'm confident that this summer, when we look back in September, will have been a successful one.
Got there, Graham Morton saying 4 of the 5 brought in January had Premier League experience, and he wants to see that again. Too many without experience could be a problem. I agree with that to a certain extent. I think that was a big problem under Mike Ashley, not allowing the managers to bring in these players who had played in the Premier League. And I mean, there's a key point here is that in January it was really key to bring in some experienced Premier League players. And the players they have brought in can set that foundation now, can't they? And this is why this summer, maybe January afterwards, we will see players coming in who have only started on the European stage and not necessarily in the Premier League, because the foundation, the spine, the backbone of Premier League experience is there.
Yeah, definitely. And we've touched on it before. And as you've just said there, it was crucial in January to get players in where it wasn't a risky deal. Dan Burn had played Premier League football for years. Matt Targett had played for 4 or 5 Premier League clubs before joining. But Eddie Howe has, he has spoken in the last couple of months about how he's not averse to bringing in, young talent from abroad. And that was when he was asked about Ekitike. So there's clearly is a desire there to bring it in. Those type of players. I mean, yes, Premier League experience can be needed at times, but look at Bruno, look at Kabay. Sometimes when you spot a gem abroad, which they think they've done with Botman, it almost isn't a risk because you know that they've done so well, they aren't going to be put off by the Premier League. So look, I think it'll be a mix again this summer. We see the likes of Calvert-Lewin and the likes of Ward-Prowse being linked. I don't think the club are against signing an experienced Premier League player. despite maybe it not being at the top of the list at the moment. But like I say, I think there'll be a mix, but I don't think Howe is against bringing in a young talent and taking that gamble this summer.
Looking at elsewhere in the Premier League, and you've mentioned a few teams there, obviously Newcastle are never going to be, at this point in time, able to rival Manchester City, Chelsea, Man United, Spurs. You could say yes, maybe to Arsenal because of the beat Bruno Guimaraes. But I even look at West Ham. They've signed Naif Erged today, Rennes defender, £30 million. Even though they're in the Europe Conference League, that's still a European competition. At this moment in time, where Newcastle are on their journey, I'm looking at it and thinking, oh, maybe they're like kind of 3 or 4 stages in the Premier League. They're not obviously at the top. Second, I'd say West Ham are kind of on the board of second and third. Do you think Newcastle are in that group of teams that can rival West Ham at the signings, or are they maybe the next stage down the top of the mid-table kind of group of teams?
I think I would put them level with West Ham, and I think fans will probably listen to that and think, really? But like you say, West Ham have got European football. They were a game away really from finishing the Europa League. They're a London club. They've got that draw of being in the capital, big stadium. So I would put Newcastle on that level. I think if it's a choice between Villa and Newcastle, I think a lot of players are choosing Newcastle. And similar really with Wolves and Everton. I think Newcastle have elevated themselves to above that level now. And it's just finally making that sort of final bridge between Newcastle and the Big Six and Leicester and other teams. I mean, you've got to think as well, it's not just about European football, it's about training facilities and other things like that. We've talked a lot on the pod about Leicester and their £400 million training base that makes, Dorsley Park look like, a League Two training ground. So there's a lot of factors, but I think if Newcastle are going up against the West Ham, likes of West Ham and Arsenal this summer, they will get some deals off them, but maybe not all of them.
That's great to see work beginning on the training ground, the diggers moving in. That is going to make a huge difference. Interesting comment there from Jonathan Darg. He says, I will give the Newcastle United board until the first pre-season home game to get players in. If not, we are in for a hard season yet again. And look, he's not the only one to voice those kind of frustrations. But as we've said, I think the general consensus is just have a bit of patience. I get, Jonathan, where you're kind of coming from. The squad needs improvement to avoid, another scrap next season. But I mean, I do at this point think it's probably good enough to make it a mid-table, comfortable position. But Newcastle obviously aiming a little bit higher than that to break into the top 10. But, the pre-season, what kicks off in, 3 weeks' time, you would say?
2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not a lot of time to get players in. And as we've mentioned, the transfer window is open into September. So there's plenty of time. Of course, we'd all like to see players come in earlier. But is this, I mean, our comments, them kind of frustration, I'm not just picking on Jonathan's point here. I'm picking on, I'm highlighting, concerns in general. Is that, again, just a case of maybe the excitement of where we think Newcastle can get to, the funds they potentially have, and that all just rolls into, that excitement boils over into this frustration, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Look, some fans will be thinking, look, we're the richest club in the world and we can attract all the players we want. Let's just get it done and have them all in by July 1st and crack on. But we know it isn't like that, and it isn't going to be that easy. As we've said, their aim is to get them in early, but it wouldn't surprise me if it drags into late July and August. But I don't think there's any need to panic if that happens. I think look, the window's just opened. It's our first summer being, the richest club in the world, all that. And I think maybe in a year or two's time, the expectation will be lessened because it won't be fresh. It won't be new. We'll be used to, having to deal with sort of agents and clubs and having that sort of battle that we probably didn't have 6 months ago. So, I mean, look, if they get to the first pre-season game and they haven't signed anyone, I wouldn't be in any panic. I think, as we say, the deals that they need to do, they'll get done. If they don't get their first target, they'll have a list of others that they can attack. So, yeah, no concern from me, but I do understand fans' frustration.
I think that's the key, is it not to panic? We've spoken there about this Newcastle United tax, which is now a very real thing of teams and even, players' demands. The prices are getting hyped up because they think Newcastle have this endless pot of gold. But in many ways, it is a game of brinksmanship, isn't it? It's who blinks first. And while Newcastle want these players, the selling club know Newcastle want these players. We mentioned previously they can't just agree to our demand, because once you start, it's a very slippery slope. So it is very important that Newcastle stand strong, stand tough. And I think in the long run, if teams are agreeing a price and hiking another 4 or 5 million on, or players are coming, player agents come back and say, well, actually, yep, we agreed this, but now we want an extra £5,000-6,000. I think in the long run, if Newcastle stand their ground and show that they're a tough operator, willing to pay the going price without getting ripped off themselves, I think that'll stand them in good stead. And teams will come to realise that Newcastle are no mugs at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the club will, and I think already they've shown that they will. We've talked a lot about Diego Carlos and how the club really, if they wanted to, could have done a deal in January. But you only have to look at the price that Villa are, reportedly paying for him to see that, they've sort of knocked £15 million off that price for Carlos this summer in terms of selling him to Villa. So it's about not overpaying, but like as we've touched on, I don't think the owners will. And I don't think they're in any need to, because as you say, let's say Lille stuck an extra £20 million on Botman's price tag, which obviously they aren't going to do. The club will walk away and look at other targets. It's not as if we're on deadline day and they sort of need to panic spend and buy players for all the odds.
A few good comments there. There was a comment just above there saying about Newcastle a mid-table side, but Chris reckons 3 or 4 top quality players could push Newcastle into the top 6. Is that a little bit ambitious, do you think? You're going to have to get the look of the green, aren't you, as well as bringing in them players to get in the top 6.
Look, yeah, they are going to need luck to push into the top 6, but I think a lot of fans this season are hoping that they're in and around the top 8. You've got to remember the last 6 months of the season, that form. You look at the form table of 2022, Newcastle were up there. Now, look, they aren't going to keep that up all season. We know that, it was probably how coming in and the signs they made, and they got a bit of luck on the way. But if that's what Newcastle can do and finish, in and around the top 10 this season after not winning in 14 games, you've got to be confident of this current side finishing mid-table next season. Add 2 or 3 top quality names, a big centre-back like Botman, a proper striker, maybe another midfielder. Look, I don't want to say it because I don't think the club will finish in the top 6, but I think anywhere between that top 6 and top 10 is reasonable for next season.
You can see it, and then I'll revisit it in a year's time if you want.
I think if you put a gun to my head now and said, where are Newcastle going to finish next season, I think they'll finish 8th. I think they'll just come up slightly short. I think they'll give it a good go of getting into Europe, but I think you've got to think there's a big 6 there now that's already been interrupted by Leicester, West Ham. Villa are strengthening massively. Everton probably won't have a bad season as they did this year. It's going to be tough next year to get in the top 6 or anywhere near it. So it's interesting to see fans talking about it in the comments, and some are maybe more optimistic than others, but it's such a big ask to finish in the top 6 next season.
We've got Darren Lee Wells there saying Newcastle should be talking 7th or 8th this season with a good cup run. Anything else is a bonus if we finish higher or reach a cup final. Tony Forbes mentioned that Newcastle are taking a bit of time to sign players, and he was asking what will they be left with in terms of their targets are going elsewhere. Where does that leave Newcastle? Again, I think we're so early on in the window. The 2 main names at the top of the list are still potentially going to arrive at Newcastle. As I mentioned, I think Ekitike will arrive on Tyneside. So I think, again, it just goes back to patience. Patience is the key.
Yeah, and I think, look, there's going to be names that probably haven't even been mentioned in the media yet that they could easily be looking at behind the scenes in case, the likes of their Botman deals and their Ekitike deals fall through. So we could be sat here in a month's time, talking to fans and a name that hadn't even been mentioned and now has been signed. So, I don't think there should be any panic this week if Botman suddenly decides that he's going to AC Milan or anything like that.
John Gandhi there says momentum is a huge factor in football. I'm pretty sure Eddie Howe won't want wholesale change this summer. We've done really well since Johnny, so the addition of 3 to 4 players will be the aim. I think that comment kind of sums it up. I do think there will be 3 or 4 exits this summer at the very least, but I can't really see more than maybe 4 or 5 players coming in the summer, because you look at who potentially starts in that, if everyone's fit, You'd say Dubravka starts in goal. Are they really going to find someone better? Kieran Trippier on the right back. You're not going to find a better right back than Kieran Trippier for everything he offers. New centre back plus one of Dan Burn, Fabian Chow, even Jamal Lascelles, who I think, even though he's been linked away, finished the season strong enough last season to maybe get yourself into that picture. Left back, Matty Target. Into the centre of the park, you say Joe Linson, Bruno Guimaraes. Again, the midfield's not a priority, so I think it probably will be John Joe Shelby or Joe Willock. Of course, you've got Sean Longstaff there. St. Maximin's a given unless someone comes in with stupid money. The other side, you could see, yeah, potentially they're going to be bringing someone in, but fit Ryan Fraser under the influence of Eddie Howe. Fantastic. Miguel Almiron, we saw what he did towards the end of last season. His agent is now seemingly playing down exits when every other year it's, dropping little hints about Inter Milan and what have you. And then, the rest of it is, it's Callum Wilson if fit. So you look around and you say, well, where actually would these new players really come in and start? Because if you're buying players of quality like Botman, they're not going to be one and sitting on the bench. But he's probably the only one really, of them positions where you see he's probably guaranteed first team football.
Yeah, look, I think over the next couple of windows, we'll see that standard lifted. So it's getting to the point where we're not talking about Fraser or Miggy. We're talking about someone of, for example, the likes of Moussa Diaby and that, those big players. But just going back to the original point that John made, Eddie Howe is, he's very, very safe. He doesn't want big changes. He want to keep the bulk of this squad together. And I think the owners as well as Howe and Ashworth will all be of the same mind that this isn't an overnight thing where we need to transform everything rapidly. We can just take it step by step. Little changes here, little changes there. I agree that I think 4 at a push 5 might come in this summer, along with maybe 5 or 6 leaving. I don't see it being a full new starting 11 come August the 6th or anything like that. So yeah,
do you see those 4 or 5 coming in and being first team starters? I guess it goes back to the point I made earlier where you would assume so, yes, and there has to be ruthless decisions made by Eddie Howe to say, well, yeah, you were first team at this point, but actually, no, you're dropping to the bench, or actually, you're out the door.
I think the bulk of the players to sign this summer will be maybe not walking into that team, but I think there'll be, starters. Botman would instantly walk in and be a starter. Ekitike, you'd think spending that money on him, on a young talent would probably get a good show. The likes of Ward Prowse, I know not a lot of fans will be agreeing with this, but I think he would walk into that team over like Shelby. I think he offers more of his all-round game. So you look at the targets that have been linked with so far. I don't think many of them you're looking at thinking you would only come in and warm the bench. I think the level of players that they're being linked with so far prove that they are trying to sort of elevate that first 11. But as we've touched on, Howe won't want to disrupt too much, that team that had that amazing run from December to March.
I tell you, it's interesting though, isn't it? Because you spend 30 million on him. He's only hit double figures once. That was last season, 10 goals. He's a young guy. He's had a couple of injuries. Hopefully, he's overcome those. But do you really put the goal scoring responsibility on him? Like, I'm not going to sit here and to our listeners, to viewers, and say I've watched any of them. I haven't. I'm not going to lie to you guys. But just with his age, and I know we said a few weeks ago that if you're good enough, doesn't matter how old you are. But it's a big responsibility, isn't it? Do you put that on him?
No, I don't think you do. And look, if he'd been a central striker playing in French's top division for 3 or 4 seasons and he was hitting double figures every season, fair enough, bring him in. But you've got to remember, he's just turned 20 today. He's coming in off the left. He's only scored 12 goals in France's top flight in what was admittedly a fantastic breakthrough season. But add in how raw he is, plus his injury concerns he's had in the last 3 months, it's a gamble bringing him in anyway, let alone leading the line. So as we've touched on in previous podcasts, I think it would be, if he comes in, it's a case of him probably battling Maxi down the left, maybe even having a spell on the right. I don't think he's coming in to battle Wilson for that number 9, at least not in the short term.
Certainly going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. Well, that is the everything. That is the end of the Everything is Black and White podcast. If I can get my words out. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please remember to like and follow the podcast through your podcast provider. To those watching on Facebook and YouTube, Thank you very much for joining us. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk to keep up to date with all the latest Newcastle United news, including our daily transfer blog, where we'll put in every rumour and concrete story in there. Thank you very much once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.